Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the football experience. We decided to do one show this week, not because of what Caleb may have alluded to regarding me not wanting to talk about the weekend's results from the EPL, but more so because we'll get into it later. But it was more that the fact that now things are a foregone conclusion. So I thought that it's probably best to sort of wrap everything up nicely that we have Champions League final, the Europa League final, and I guess we have pretty much the winners from every single league bar Bundesliga, I guess, after this last weekend. So yeah, let's get into it, Caleb. Let's get into something a little bit juicy. And I guess we'll get off with the Champions League. How about that? How about that? The Champions League
Yeah.
to begin us. Um do you want to take it away?
Ooh. Where to start? Do you want to start big picture or game?
Uh, start the game, I guess, and then we'll go into big picture. Little picture, big picture.
Have you the thing that stood out to me, and I nearly made a note of it, but good thing I didn't because it ended up happening often during the game. But have you ever seen your boy Luka Modric play as poorly as that?
You know what? And like this isn't no bias and all that, but like I don't know if I can put all the blame onto one player,
No,
but
no, 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 no. But this is
yeah,
this is
yes.
this goes into like the tone of the game because I'm not picking.
Mm.
If I am picking on Luka Modric, it's because he's an all-time great and he's still playing it at that kind of
And
level.
you haven't seen him have a bad game.
Yeah, not a bad game for him is an average game, but he
Mm,
was actively bad on
mm,
on the Wednesday night, and I think that's a jarring experience, and that's why I start
mm.
there to sort of pinpoint that. And then I guess in terms of the game, look, we I guess the underlying thing with Luka Modric as well is there was that injury cloud around him and touch and go whether he'd be fully fit for this. Probably suggested he might not have been fully fit.
But you
Um,
didn't see that in the first leg.
exactly, that's what I was going to say as well. And this, the reason I offered the to go big picture and little picture is because I think this game, big picture, sort of I know I'm just veering away from the game straight away, but big picture, this game was sort of the game that said even no matter what happens in the Champions League final, and I don't mean that flippantly, I mean that in terms of it won't matter if Manchester City lose it. Manchester City are the best team in Europe this season. Like I don't think anyone else can claim to be sitting on the throne after this season in terms of just overall excellence, somewhat consistency because they did have a touch and go patch in the middle, but the start of the season, they were so good, and now, all right. Well, let's start with this, and this will lead us to the game. Do you think Manchester City are better now, or what they were at the start of the season, or even last season, if you want to extend it to that?
If I'm comparing now to at the start of the season, probably better now. They seem to be the energy seems to be higher than what it was at the start of the season. De Bruyne seems De Bruyne, Haaland seems to be working a lot more off the ball, as well as still continuing to score like 2-3 goals almost every game. So that hasn't necessarily dropped off, but you can see that off the ball work with all the players has amped up. Um, and there's a lot more, I guess, fluidity on the ball as well. And Haaland seems to be linking up a lot more. And it's the one thing I criticized him around the Liverpool game,
Yeah.
the first Liverpool game, where I said that his hold up play was terrible. And he must have listened to the pod and watched some Giroud videos
I'm
because his
pretty
hold up
sure.
play it's improved a lot.
All right, let's look at Haaland in the microcosm, and to your point, how nice would that goal have been if he and Gundogan linked up? That ball he turned around the corner for Gundogan's back heel, and then Courtois' save onto the bar. That would have probably been the nicest goal of the night. As it was, Haaland didn't score on the night, which is
Mm.
crazy to think. But yet again, it was another more complete performance than we were seeing. Certainly in the middle part of the season, start of the season. That's why I asked the question, because start of the season, I think to my eye, they were better than they are now. They came flying out of the blocks, and they, with Haaland, they looked so good. They were such a force in the counter attack. But in terms of better, you probably have to say now, given the stakes of the games they're playing in. And in terms of Haaland, I think it's crazy because I was going to say Pep. I think Pep always had it in his mind that he wants to make him more complete because he's so young and
Mm.
he's still got a way to go. But he's scored over
You
50
can still
goals.
mold him.
He's scored over 50 goals. That's the crazy thing. I don't think. Man, I struggle to think. Probably have to be back to Messi, where Pep's actively molding a player, and they're putting up those
Mm.
kinds of numbers. Like their game or their output hasn't suffered at all, which is just nuts to think. And I guess in terms of in the game, the thing I noticed footballing wise, or I guess personnel wise, in the game, it really just hit home how good Manchester City's three key attacking players are, because they have the goal machine in Haaland. They have the moments specialist, probably the best moments player in the world this season, and that's another part why I started on Modric, because this game sort of maybe signified that Kevin De Bruyne has now taken over that mantle in that midfield, because he is the ultimate moments player now, and if the team needs a moment, he'll provide it, and I don't know, he's unbelievable. And then the other one I throw into there, which is crazy, but Jack Grealish is like he's like the Bukayo Saka of this team. He draws all the gravity to him. He puts in an unbelievable amount of defensive work, and the fact that he has been so good, especially in this run-in, has almost negated Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva to a secondary role in this team. The player who
What about Phil Foden? He's benched.
Phil Foden doesn't play. The attack
Yeah.
is incredible, man, and it's just and that's, I think the main portion of credit has to go to Jack Grealish, because I think he's a key player. I think he's the one I didn't see, and I guess we didn't see Haaland scoring this many goals in his first season. I didn't think he'd go this nuts. I thought he'd be
I think we all predicted 40.
well, but that was after we saw what he did at the start of the season. I mean, if he gets off to a start where he scored 1 in 3 or something, we're not saying that. It's crazy. I don't think before the season, 50 goals, that's astronomical. But anyway, the one neither of us brought it up, but Jack Grealish just went to 2 extra levels, I think, this season. To be compared to Bukayo Saka, who I keep saying is Arsenal's best player, to say that certainly on form at this present moment, he is outplaying Bukayo Saka, and that is why Manchester City are going to win the Premier League, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, it just stood out how good that attack is, and that is the big. Well, I'll throw the question back to you. Where was the game won and lost in this tie?
Probably a combination of the front three and the midfield, because they were like, you saw Haaland running like an absolute monster every time Courtois got the ball. And you didn't see that in the first leg from memory. So the way that the front three pressed to actually put Courtois and Militao and Alaba under pressure every time they got the ball, so they had to try and go long. And then the way that then the defense would just, as a defender, you don't need to, you just need to sort of get a touch onto it to disrupt the attacker. But the attacker actually needs to control the ball. Whereas, like we've seen in AFL, defenders never try to mark the ball. They always just try to punch it. And it's the same in football as well. Like, you just need to get a little bit of a toe onto it, a little bit of a head onto it. Just push the defender, push the attacker just a little bit so that he miscontrols it, so that then it falls to another one of your players, and then the midfielders just pick up the ball, and then then they play pretty much play on the counter, and they play against the disrupted and not settled Real Madrid midfield and back four.
Well, there's two things that go into that, and the first thing is the underlying thing of why Manchester City are so good, and we've laboured on this point before, but the press has gone up crazy levels recently in this run in. The pressure, the intensity that those front players play into, to have Bernardo Silva and Jack Grealish working as hard as they do in these games. Rodri obviously was probably one of the best holding midfielders, and we'll have to touch on the other best holding midfielder from last season because when we come to how this game was lost. But yeah, that pressure going forward from Manchester City has just gone to a crazy level. But in terms of, I lost my train of thought. Well, actually, no. Here, in terms of why they won the midfield, I think Manchester City, and it's something that I've been lamenting all season, but it's something that has undeniably worked until this point. I thought Real Madrid got it half right. In they gave John Stones the leave him alone to have the ball treatment, and to be fair, he did give away possession 2, 3, 4 times in the game. Maybe one of the ones later didn't really matter, but yeah, they got it half right, but then they could never meet Manchester City's intensity. Real Madrid, they never got close to it. They didn't touch it, and that's why when we say where this game was won and what Manchester City have been building to do, pretty much for this moment. Well, there's a question for you. Is I think you could tell by the way they were celebrating it. And I don't want to say it was over celebration. I don't think Pep would let himself get carried away, but he did want to make a point of letting Man City enjoy that moment. And I think that really was their final, rounding it back to my first point in terms of that was the statement game. That is the game that everyone's going to remember. Even if they beat Inter, 2-0 in the final, we're not going to remember the final. We're going to remember that game against Real Madrid, the 4-0. They dethroned the reigning champions, the team who always, the narrative around them has been they're destined to win the thing every year now. And that only flipped because of the incredible run last season. But yeah, this game was the statement game, and they've been building to this moment, and you can see the evolution this season by making their game just unbelievably multifaceted. They can beat you any which way now. I think the icing on the cake, or the final layer to the building, whatever analogy you want to use, was the way they've beaten Arsenal in both games in the league this season. And that's the moment where I think it was like they're willing to play like that to win games now, and they're willing to do it to a higher level than any other team that win games like that. So when they can do that, when they can possess, when they can overload you in midfield with John Stones, which was the thing that no team has been able to pinpoint, but I have a sneaky feeling Inter might give them a few problems with that. We'll see. But that might be looking too far ahead. But when you think, yeah, they beat teams tactically, they beat them with physicality. You look at the back four, it's all centre backs. I don't know. Where's the weakness? Where do you beat this team? And that's where I'm a little disappointed that managers haven't come up with a better way, because I still think there's little chinks in the armour, but no one's shown them. And it's hard to sit here and say that there might still be little chinks in the armour when they've just won a semi-final second leg 4-0 against the defending champions with all the players that they have. But we'll touch on them, I think, pretty soon.
Well, I wanted to ask you, do you think, or should the question be Man City, and then later I'll ask about, because this question is about Real Madrid.
Go whichever way.
We'll
wrap up.
Man
City.
City.
Wrap up right. City, and then we'll go to Real.
So I want to bring this to, I want to relate it to one sport, one esport, and in League of Legends, there's a team that I followed. It was called G2 Esports. They basically created a super team, I think like 3-4 years ago, where they literally got like the MVP of every single like position. And in their first year, or like I guess their first split, because it's divided into half seasons, I guess. Like, so you got your summer split and your winter split. They just steamrolled. They just went through every competition. They pretty much went undefeated. In the final, they beat the team 3-0. And then in the second split, they steamrolled the first half of the season. And then they actually no, I think the first year like they pretty much steamrolled, but then when it came to the World Championships, they lost in the final, right? And then they made like a little documentary about it and everything, and a lot of the players said they just got like mentally fatigued of playing at like the highest ceiling like the whole time. Then the following season, like you heard interviews from the players saying, "Oh, like, we're just sort of like taking it easy and whatnot." And I guess like the first half of the season, like they steamrolled, and then they went through a lull period, but they still won like their European finals, and quite convincingly. But like they basically went like this instead of the previous season where they just went like that the whole time, and then they had the massive drop off in the most important game. And in NBA, related to the same thing, you have a lot of teams because it's an 82 game season. You have a lot of teams that sort of like coast through the season, or like they start really strong, and then in the middle they have a dip, and then towards the end they finish strong so they can get a better finals position because they might be languishing like in sixth to eighth, and then instead of finishing there, they finish fourth or second or something like that. Do you think that Man City might have done this inadvertently because of the World Cup? Because like don't forget, like this was a World Cup year as well, and generally after a World Cup you have a four. I think players generally get 4 weeks off after a World Cup, depending on how deep they go. I think the players that make the semis and final, they generally get 2 to 3 weeks off.
Not only the rest factor for the World Cup, but Man City had a lot of disappointed players come back to that team
Yeah,
as well.
that too.
Yeah.
But my point is like maybe and remember they had that dip around pretty much all of January was a dip. Going into the World Cup, that's when the dip started to happen because they lost that last game before the World Cup. They
Brentford
lost
at
to
home.
Brentford at home, and then they started to actually turn it on around the middle of Feb. Um, it was around those two Tottenham games, and I think the Arsenal game quickly followed as well. So, do you think that it was either on purpose, or do you think it was like inadvertent that like they basically went through that lull period in the middle of the season, and now they've ramped up. They're not ramping up. They have ramped up, and they with like pretty much 3 finals left. They have Do they have 2 games or 3 games left in the Premier League? I think 3 games left in the Premier League. Yeah, and then a final, FA Cup final, and Champions League final. So they have 5 games left. Premier League's pretty much all wrapped up. We'll get to that later on, but like 5 games left, players are in peak form, peak condition, and we've seen it with in the Bundesliga, especially with Bayern, with Pep as well. He'd have the league wrapped up in like late March, early April, and then it would affect the Champions League performances.
Yeah, so in terms of,
So,
I think the way they were playing after the World Cup, while I wouldn't put it past Pep not foreseeing what was going to happen post World Cup, him and his staff, definitely physical levels, given that players' mental levels as well. So I would say they would have planned somewhat for that. But let's not forget that this pushed Pep to the brink of, well, not to the brink, to the point of that post-match press conference after a 4-2 win at home against Tottenham. That's what their form was doing to him at that time. So
mm.
he
And
definitely...
you know what else? The whole financial accusations against City
Yeah,
was around that same time
yeah.
as well. Like, so they had the whole Premier League and the whole world against them as well. So he
He
created
definitely...
that like sort of siege mentality.
Yeah, he definitely used that, you would say. And I think that was a galvanizing point. But another thing... So it definitely wasn't by design, because Pep would never want his teams playing the way they were in the middle portion of the season. They weren't very good.
Mm.
I would still argue that they're... no, they're pretty good to watch, but they're not... I don't think they're of the level to watch aesthetically as they were last season or the Centurion season. But as we keep saying, it's maybe more admirable what they're doing now. But anyway, but the thing I was going to point to of why there is some intent to it is for the way he handled Ruben Diaz after the World Cup. He was very cautious. He was very reluctant to play in post World Cup. He gave him a lot of time not playing games. I don't think it was time off. He was still around. He was still on the bench. We wondered if it was a form thing because he'd just fallen out with João Cancelo as well and forced him to be moved on. But now, looking back at it at this point where we sit now, you've got to say that was by design. You've almost got to say that City just rope-a-doped us in that middle part of the season and they were always building for this. Now, I think there's a counter argument to that. I think that they very conceivably could have won a quadruple last season. They were in the running. They were arguably the best team in Europe. I would say if you're not going to put them, you have to put Liverpool. It was between those two. So they could have won everything last season. But last season also did push them to have this dark side to them this season. It's to have the I wouldn't say the dark arts because they still do it in a footballing sense and they still do it well, but winning games in that gritty fashion, winning that games with guts, and just finally because we haven't shouted him out yet, and we've pretty much shouted everyone else out. You got to say as well how pivotal Kyle Walker was over the two legs. When you're talking about players in peak form, he's definitely one who's been important. Inter, well, I might be looking too far ahead, but I don't know if the Inter game is a game for Kyle Walker. That'll be an interesting one to see. But definitely for the game against Vinny. But the other one, who's out here looking like a prime David Silva, talk about players in peak form, Ilkay Gundogan. And my God, the game against Everton, the first goal against Everton was incredible, and then again this performance against Real Madrid was also incredible. He's much like Bernardo Silva. He's been pushed to a supporting role, and that's fine because those other three have been really good. But Bernardo Silva and Ilkay Gundogan are fantastic in this game, and yeah, they are afterthoughts almost. It's incredible to
I
think.
think Goodwine's leaving at the end of the season as well, so this is his last dance with City, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we'll see. That's an interesting one because I know he hasn't signed a new contract, but I haven't.
Mm,
Also haven't heard of anything where he will go next. So I guess that's a watch this space. But I think
yeah, and
do
I
you?
was going to say on Bernardo Silva, I guess this was his job application to Barcelona. So it's like, hey, here's my highlight reel against Real Madrid.
Yeah, he doesn't need it. He just show him last season, show him the last whatever 3-4 seasons at City he's had. He's just been an
But
unbelievable player.
but like because of all the rumors of him wanting to go to Barcelona at the start of the season, I guess this was his like, hey, come and get me, do everything you can to sign me, sort of
But I don't know.
performance.
This City team looks so united. So even if there are those question marks over certain players, you're not seeing it right now. I think
Mm.
they're so locked in. They're so focused. They're so together in achieving their mission this season, and it has become a very a very plausible, if not only just possible, mission this season. It seems like, man, they should have the treble. Really, they should. They've wrapped up the Premier League just about. They will in the coming days or weeks or whatever it is, and they're heavily
Mm.
favoured in each of the finals they're going to play in. So they're on the brink. Let's see if they can do it. But yeah, man, they've hit unbelievable levels that I didn't foresee coming in that middle part of the season, and you just got to take your hat off to them. But we also need to talk about the other side of the story in this tie, don't we?
Real Madrid.
Oh, man, uh, there was no vindication because it took so long for this to happen. But eventually, this is what happened when they were playing a good team, a really good team, the best team in Europe, and they had to play the second leg away from home. But that is unfair to say because where did Real Madrid lose this game for you? Because we can point to
Um,
gritty things in the game.
I'm gonna
Yeah, go on.
I'm gonna point to one specific. And this isn't to lay blame on anyone particularly. But once I saw the team sheet, I was like, probably wouldn't have played Rodrigo. Probably would have played Valverde, and then would have had Tchouaméni in the midfield with Kroos and Modric, and then Valverde. He always comes back and helps out in that midfield. So then you end up getting four in there. Um, that's probably the only one thing I would have changed in
And that's
regards to
yeah,
their
go on.
intensity. How do you change that? Like, do you bring them to do you bring them to Manchester a day early so they sleep there one night or two nights? I don't know. How, but in terms of tactics, that's the one thing I would have changed.
Yeah, it was questionable. In terms of tactics, if we go into the nitty gritty, Valverde was almost playing as a holding midfielder. It was very
I
odd.
actually didn't see him in the first half at all, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah, and that was disappointing because if there's one player who I would set on to target, and I always say John Stones first, but I think Rodri can be got at when he receives the ball in those positions as
Mm.
well, particularly at the angles that he has to receive it. It's Fede Valverde. He's easily Real Madrid's best pressing midfielder. And to have him in a holding position where I think he lost his man for the first goal, and then before it got switched out to the other side. So he was having a torrid time. I agree with you, especially going to the Etihad. And we must also mention, in terms of where this tie was won and lost, the Etihad was electric. That place was, it felt, I think everyone around Manchester City recognised the significance of this game to put to bed those demons of last season and to put to bed the institution that are Real Madrid on your way to they'll hope to win a title. I don't think it's quite done, but we'll talk about that when we talk about the other side. Um, but yeah, that place was electric, and tactically, yeah, I thought that was questionable. Rodrigo was awful. Benzema was borderline poor. If he wasn't average, he was poor. Modric
Who
was
turned up?
no one turned up. No one turned up,
Probably
and
Courtois, actually.
Courtois was awesome. Courtois was actually a winner out of this game. He solidified his position as, for me, the best goalkeeper in the world. I thought Mike Mignon was all
Mhm.
right in the other tie, but Courtois for me was outstanding in both legs, and he sort of solidified his place as that. But yeah, no one else comes out of this smelling like roses. We're not gonna beat up Vinny because he's had an unbelievable season. We're not gonna beat up Benzema because he's an all-time great. We're not going to beat up Modric or Kroos because they're part of that midfield that was so dominant for so long. So there's nothing to beat up. It'll be interesting to see if this signifies the end, probably not of Benzema, but Kroos and Modric. I know Kroos is cheeky, younger than you think.
Modric signed a 1 year
Yeah,
extension.
I know he did, but like not literally the end, but the end of elite, like that elite level.
Mm.
They are of that age. And Kroos, I've got to say, this is my bigger picture point of where Real Madrid lost this tie, because they don't have Casemiro. They're relying on Kroos and Valverde, and they don't have Casemiro, and they also don't have a number one defender. I know they brought in Rudiger, but Rudiger for me is not a number one of a centre back partnership. I think Real Madrid have three of the best number two centre backs of a partnership that you could possibly have in terms of Alaba, Militao, and Rudiger. And for the most part, two of the best twos together will equal, being good enough to get to this point. Because let's not forget, they got to the semi-finals of the Champions League. It's not a terrible failure. Um, but in a game like this, they needed a Ruben Diaz back there next to one of them. They didn't need two of them playing together. And what got them through last season was they didn't need that because they had Casemiro in front of him. And he's just about a number one defensively as he is as a holding midfielder. And he would always plug in those gaps. And you see that goal for Bernardo Silva, which is crazy that he's given that much time. And it's crazy because Camavinga goes to press and Kroos initially takes on the responsibility of filling in for Camavinga. And then the ball goes into midfield, and for some reason, Kroos just leaves Bernardo Silva alone. And there's absolutely no way that happens because I don't think, even if Tony Kroos does leave him alone, Casemiro sees that last season, and he's across there, and he's not selling himself.
I
Luka
was
Modric,
I was thinking the exact same thing. Oh, like that pass is not getting through if Casemiro's
and
there.
even if it does get through, Casemiro is standing over Bernardo Silva like a presence, and he's not getting anywhere. So,
Mm.
for me, the tie was lost in losing Casemiro because, for the most part, Real Madrid, and I agree as well, they would have given themselves a better chance with Tchouaméni in there because he is as close a facsimile of Casemiro as Real Madrid have this season. I found it very surprising. I would wonder what's going through Tchouaméni's mind right now to not start in either of the ties when he was meant to be the guy replacing that guy. And I don't know. I found that a little bit baffling in both legs, to be quite honest. And yeah, I think that's where they lost it because they've been doing fine. They've been cruising because they're Real Madrid. They have such fantastic attacking talents. They have such fantastic midfielders. Like I said, still great defenders, a great goalkeeper. But in these moments where you play the absolute best and you need to be at your absolute best, you need to be at that level to stay with Manchester City. They couldn't do it because for me they didn't have Casemiro. They didn't have a foundational piece in that midfield. They didn't have the guy who gave them the solidity. And if you don't have that, you lose 4-0 away at Manchester City because they're that good. So yeah, I love how these games show you who players really are for me because it showed us who Real Madrid are without Casemiro, the questions that we had over them all season, but they didn't really pop their head up until this point. And for me, like I know this sounds petty, but it also showed me a bit that John Stones just isn't quite at that level as a central midfielder. And like, we're not surprised by that, but he did give away a few very sloppy passes. And Real Madrid were disappointed because there was one particular in the first half where they could have counted on it, and they didn't. They were so sloppy with their first pass. And even if their first
Yeah.
pass came out, Benzema's hold-up play was about as sloppy as I've ever seen it. So, yeah, it was a very uncharacteristic performance by Real Madrid. Very poor performance and very anticlimactic, much in the theme of what the last couple of weeks have been. But, I mean, we did just wax lyrical about Manchester City for ages, and rightly so. So, I think that's the main takeaway.
I just want to quickly ask, like, how much praise should we be putting on City? Because when I was watching this game, and like you sort of alluded to it, it just felt like Real Madrid did not show up. And is that more because City were just pressing and had just raised the intensity so much to make it look like they didn't show up? Or because like there was times when Modric was giving the ball away and he wasn't even under pressure, and he was giving wayward passes. Cruz was giving wayward passes. Vinny couldn't like he
Carl Walker
couldn't
was
control the
unbelievable.
ball.
Oh my
Benzema,
god.
but like Benzema couldn't
Yeah.
control the ball. Like it just felt like I don't know. Like did they get a good night's sleep or what was it like? I remember I once when I once played, it was the worst performance ever. Like my mind was like my mind felt like it was switched on. I'll be like, oh, go get the ball over there, and then my body would just be like, oh, you want me to get the ball, like, and then it would just be like that. Like I'll be like, come on, like,
Yeah. Yeah, we've all
mate,
been there. It's just not your day,
but
it's
I
not your
don't.
night, but
Yeah, like, but like for pretty much all 11, minus Courtois, so all 10 outfield players to be that poor. Like I literally can't name one outfield player that actually I don't know that showed up.
yeah,
Like
no, they were. And for me, the answer is always somewhere in between. But I'm tempted to lean more to giving City praise for a few key examples because you name the players who were playing poorly for Real Madrid. Well, Vinny could not get past Kyle Walker at all. Kyle Walker was. That's. It's almost fool's gold thinking that you can go at Kyle Walker with your rapid sort of left winger.
he did get him in the first leg a couple of times, if you remember.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing with Kyle Walker, I don't think he's an unbelievable defender, but you need to be in a position where you can push City back somewhat. They can't be defending in their own half because if that's the case, it's too much ground to cover, and he's almost like he looks like an Olympic sprinter when he gets into full stride, even at his age still. So he couldn't get past him. I thought Ruben Diaz, there was a key tackle in the first half that he laid on Benzema, and I was just thinking that set the tone for the night, because I was just thinking Benzema never gives the ball away. If the ball gets into his feet, he's not giving it away. But Ruben Diaz lays that tackle. He lays a marker there. In terms of the midfield one, that's harder to say, but I think it wasn't a direct matchup, but Kevin De Bruyne just outplayed Modric. There's no doubt about that. So that's why, like, I think City, they won the tactical battle, no doubt. And this goes back into the point where I want to give them praise, because they could beat you anyway. They won the tactical battle. But remember the game at St. James's Park where they drew 3-3? And Newcastle are a team who make the game very much one-on-one battles. And I thought, for the most part, Manchester City lost their key battles that day. Well, this night, against Real Madrid, they won all those key battles. Player-on-player battles, they won them all. And that's what I'm saying about their evolution. That's what I'm saying about the way they are so multifaceted now. And yeah, that's why I'm leaning, as much as I don't want to criticize Real Madrid, because a lot of them are living legends. But as much as they deserve the criticism for this game, I want to lean more to giving praise for Manchester City, because they deserve it, man. They deserve it. It's hard for me to say, because I don't like Manchester City that much.
Oh, well, we need to give praise where we need to give praise. Also, to our listeners, I just realized for some reason OBS wasn't picking up my audio. My microphone wasn't muted. I think just I went into the property settings, so the audio for the first like half hour of mine might be poor. So Caleb, I'm gonna have to grab that audio off you afterwards and work my magic.
You could have just left that till after the.
That was still. But like, I guess that gives us a good transition into the other game if we're done with City and Real.
Yeah, I think we're done.
So the Milan derby. I'll let you take it away once again.
Well, anticlimactic again, wasn't it? I mean,
Well,
but I don't know. But I don't think anyone was expecting a climax that was. I don't know. Maybe we were expecting something to happen.
I don't think so, because
Over the two legs, very controlled, wasn't it?
I think we predicted, especially since it was 2-0 in the first leg, and I was going to say Osimhen, but Leao pulled off
Same thing. We've done. We've been through that.
Yeah, I was just like, man, we got this one right. Like he pulled off his best Osimhen second leg impression, minus the goal.
Yeah.
Like I think there was one instance where he broke free on the counter attack.
Yeah, in the first.
Yeah, but other than that, like he wasn't getting. They weren't even playing. They weren't even trying to play to his side though either, which was very strange.
Inter played 15 yards deeper this game. They never gave him the space because
Yeah.
they never had to. They were 2-0 up, and yeah, he just never ever got the room. And if there's
Leao
one thing
never
that
got
he
the ball to his
needs a bit
feet.
of room.
He never really got the ball to his feet either. They never played on his side to even like let him go 1v1 or 2v1, like to run at them rather than playing on the counter. Like they never allowed that either. They never played that way. That was strange.
I think it's just the fact that, and I didn't hear anyone picking any kind of Milan comeback going into this, and yeah, after what happened in the weekend with Milan, did you see the dressing down they got from the Ultras at Spezia?
I saw something though.
2-0?
Yeah.
Yeah, they got like apparently it was motivational. It wasn't anything more than that, but
Some tough love.
I don't know. But man, after that happened on the weekend, it's like, what chance do we give AC Milan? They're just not. They shouldn't be at this point of the competition. And this is coming from someone who loved their run to winning the championship last season in Italy. But this season, they have been wounded. They've been stumbling. And I think the fact that they were wounded in the middle part of the season, funnily enough, somewhat led them to being here, somewhat accidentally. Because remember, they had to adapt and go to the 3-4-3 in the middle part of the season. That ended up matching up nicely against Tottenham, who they were able to see off because I think even though Tottenham have a few good players, overall Milan have more good players in other areas. And then I think it was a perfect storm of circumstances that saw them get past Napoli. The fact that they went there and here's the credit I'll give them, because that 4-0 in Serie A at Napoli was a picture of what Milan should look like when they're firing on all cylinders. It's maybe the only time we've seen it all season. They started the season okay, to be fair, but in the run-in, it's definitely the only time we've seen them play like that. And that was ultimately, well, along with a lot of other factors, but that was a big factor in why they had the confidence to get past Napoli, who were flying at the time, as well as obviously the Victor Osimhen injury. And then we can't negate that Milan are missing Leao in the first leg and all the damage is done in the first leg. So anticlimactic is pretty maybe strong given what happened in the first leg. Like I said, no one was picking Milan to come back. And I think it's because we kind of saw that just Milan are very good, and Inter in this moment are very good. And I didn't really see them being this good, but man, I don't know what more there is to say from this tie. I don't know. Did you observe anything notable in the game? I must say I didn't
Um,
really.
Not really.
But
Like
I did.
Inter played it like we expected them to play it. They sat a little bit deeper, and they just absorbed because they know that they can absorb. Especially they know they can absorb what AC Milan can throw at them. The only thing that I'll maybe give, um, I guess, commendations on is the fact that at least in the Champions League, Lukaku seems to be a little bit of an impact player coming off on the bench. He set up that the only goal in the game as well, and I don't know, like maybe that could be a secret weapon in the final. Rather than him
Yeah,
starting,
so
he plays the last 30, 35 minutes.
yeah, I think you and I are on the same page with this, because I don't think there's much to digest from the second leg and what we saw in terms of the game. And I think already we're looking ahead to how Inter will match up against Manchester City. And honestly, like I alluded to last pod, I think this is the worst. This is probably, and it's easy to say this in hindsight, but this is probably a worse matchup than Real Madrid. I think Inter. Now it's interesting. Inter do have. They do love to play the ball out from deep. And so they are used to that. It'll be interesting to see if they want to continue to do that and bait Manchester City into a press. Man, that's meeting fire with fire, because Inter have done this for years. Even under Conte, they love doing this. But Manchester City right now are the best forward pressing team in the world, without a doubt. So you are meeting fire with fire there, and well, you're playing with fire, and any mistake could be very costly there. But say it again, I don't think that Pep loves playing against a 5-3-2. And I think a 5-3-2, for me, I personally love a 5-3-2, because I think it is the highest basement, but maybe a lower ceiling formation to a lot of other formations. I think playing a back four, you've got a lot more chance of errors that are costly, but you also have a chance that you can play unbelievable football. Whereas a 5-3-2, I think you're eliminating a lot of chances of those errors, but you're maybe limiting how good the football will be that you can play. But I think for coming up against this Manchester City team, I think that's the perfect way to play. And I think there'll be no spaces where Manchester City are going to want to operate that Inter are going to leave, just inherently because of the formation. Simone, I think it's. I heard. I can't remember which pod they said. It was a throwaway line anyway, but they were saying that Inter have to play a game like no other to win this final. Well, I disagree a little bit with that. I think they have to play a game like every other, because this is just how Simone Inzaghi plays. This is how Inter have played for years. Even Antonio Conte when he was there, he didn't use a 3-4-3. He used a 5-3-2, like they continue to use. And that's why I thought Inzaghi was a great appointment, because they would just carry on playing exactly the same way they played under Conte. And that's what's happened. And when Inzaghi's teams look good, I really rate what I see from their 5-3-2s, because they always have out balls. A 5-3-2 allows you to play two up front, so the two of them can occupy probably all five of Manchester City's out. Well, they're pretty much five centre backs. Rodri's a hybrid, but can play centre back. But yeah, all those players are pretty much centre backs who want to play out. I think they're going to ask them to sort of hedge between the holding midfielders and the three up front. And then there's just not going to be those pockets where Manchester City, where De Bruyne and Gundogan want to operate, because you've always got a three-man midfield. And if they're beaten, then you've got three centre-backs behind it, who are, one of them can always go into midfield to press. So yeah, I think this is the perfect formation to go up against Manchester City when you're playing at a deficit. Now, Bayern and Real Madrid, I think, would have felt that they could. I feel like both of those teams could have played differently to still beat Manchester City, because I think the quality gap isn't as great. Whereas from Manchester City to Inter, I think is a greater gap still than those two teams. I don't think that's breaking ground to say. But yeah, in terms of what any of the teams, apart from Napoli, out of this side of the draw could do, this might have been the worst team that Manchester City could have played. And I'm going to be fascinated, because I wouldn't predict it, but I've got a funny feeling Inter might be there to spoil the party come the final.
I got one. I'm surprised you didn't touch onto it, but does this formation actually counter what City does with John Stones? Because you got two forwards now rather than one, and one of them is Lautaro.
Lautaro is one of the best pressing forwards in the world, for sure.
So does this stop John Stones coming into midfield then?
That's interesting. I think they might still want John Stones coming into midfield so that he can sort of play on the shoulder of Lautaro and Dzeko and sort of in behind them, so that they can always occupy them, and it gives the three in front of them more space to play. But the thing is, I think Inter will be very happy with Kyle Walker, Ruben Diaz, and Manuel Akanji / Nathan Ake possessing the ball in front of them. They're not going to care about that. So somewhat, Inter's formation can negate what they're doing in terms of... I don't think they'll stop bringing Stones into there, but I think that Lautaro...
Is it a good counter, though, to set up the press or the trap that you keep on mentioning every other week?
Yeah, I think it will, because I think those two strikers, like you mentioned, they will sort of hedge. They will play to try and cut off the angles into those players, and then they'll be able to engage with those three players in front of them when they can, which I think if they set it up right, they can force traps in areas. It's going to be, I think a lot of this game, given how congested the middle of the park will come down to who wins the battles out wide. I think that's going to be very key, and I think both sides match up quite nicely. Denzel Dumfries up against Jack Grealish. Denzel Dumfries not the greatest defender, and I guess that's why you have Matteo Darmian, who's naturally sort of more of a right back playing behind him because he can double up. But what Dumfries, I'd say, does have over Grealish is definitely physicality, although Grealish is very physical this season as well. And DeMarco against Bernardo Silva on the other side is almost a perfect matchup. Those are two very similar players. Obviously, Bernardo a lot better going forward, but I think they match up quite nicely on that side as well. So, yeah, I think they'll be the key moments. I don't know if they'll trap John Stones. I don't know if they have a special pressing plan, but I do think, to your point, the formation will inherently give them chances to do that, given where their numbers lie in those centre back areas and in the midfield areas, and with two up front as well, of course.
Yeah, because I don't know. I'm just thinking about, like, on paper, every team that City has gone up against, it's been like one forward and then two wingers, which has allowed Stones to drop into that midfield. Whereas like when you have two forwards, like, and it's pretty much that sort of classical 4-4-2 thinking with the two forwards, where it's like one big man to operate to engage with the centre back or centre backs, and then one that runs in behind him or around him and does all the work around him, with Dzeko or Lukaku and Lautaro. So it just, like, on paper it seems perfect to trap at least, or to counter it.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat perfect. Might be a bit strong, but it's steady. I think it's steady to stop Manchester City, but also, like you say, to potentially trap them if they get it right. But I think the main foundation of the Inter game plan, and it's not going to be surprising to hear this, but will be to stop and to contain and to just make sure Manchester City are playing at the pace they want them to play. Make sure the game doesn't get out of hand too intense. Make sure all those gaps are clogged up, and a 5-3-2 is perfect for clogging up those gaps. So I think that's the foundation, but in those moments where they can, they're going to need to try and trap, and then they're going to need to try and counter. But that's why I like 5-3-2 as well, because you've always got two out balls up front. You've always got two up front, and yeah, maybe they can sort of get in behind Rodri and Stones and cause trouble to Ruben Diaz. Maybe that's where the pace of Kyle Walker on the cover comes into play. But yeah, I think if it wasn't going to be Napoli, it had to be Inter coming out of this side of the draw to at least give us the perception of an interesting match. We'll see if in reality it pans out that way, because there is still a big possibility Manchester City just roll in and win 2 or 3-0 and ho hum, they've won the Champions League. That is a very real possibility, but I'm hoping it doesn't go that way.
You know, if I'm not mistaken, the last time there was a new winner of winning the inaugural Champions League was Chelsea 2012.
Sounds all right.
And you know how you have that that whole notion of, or that whole superstition or tradition of the winner always having a Croatian player, that started from the following season, with Bayern winning against Dortmund. So,
what do you say? Are you ready for that tradition to end, or are you just?
Here's the thing: it sets up the narrative of either the tradition ends and City win it, or the tradition continues and Inter win it. So it's like perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect on both sides, because obviously Inter are 3 times champions themselves.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, the team to actually like stop that tradition is a team that wins their first Champions League. Whereas, like, for instance, I think Liverpool last season would have been the first team, but it wouldn't have been their first. So, like, this is like that double punch where it's like it's their very first Champions League in the history that they could win, and they also break that tradition as well. So it's like, you know, so sorry to bring up your boys.
That was why. We didn't need to do that.
No, but City could have done it themselves 2 years ago when they lost to Chelsea. So again, they were in. It was pretty much the same thing. But yeah, like it's interesting that little like side. It's like a side quest is there.
Well, Edin Dzeko has his own side quest as well. Imagine he comes back, scores the winner. Manchester City.
Did he set up Aguero's one, or was that Balotelli that set it up?
No, it was Balotelli. He scored the other one.
He scored the equalizer, I think. Yeah,
he did.
So
The forgotten goal, I'll say, the Dzeko goal. But I'm sure we'll talk more about what's going to happen in the final a little bit closer.
Well, you still, the thing is, like, you still have City still have 4 games before then. Injuries could happen, either in games or in training. So, and it's like, I think it's June 12th. So it's like 3 weeks away, 3.5 weeks away or something like that. So,
but we don't know if all those games will be at full intensity with full team, whereas Inter might have to play more games at full intensity with full team.
But like,
but again, that goes
we...
into, are you coming in sharp? Are you coming in rusty? Like there's so many conundrums with that.
But the thing is, like, we don't know what will happen in the next 3.5 weeks. Like Haaland could sustain some kind of injury that the Osman curse comes in.
Yeah, but Manchester City will be fine. That's the crazy thing. They're probably not quite as good without him, but they'll be absolutely fine if they lose Erling Haaland. Like, because think of how they did everything that they did last season. It was all without him. So, like, I know it'll be terrible to have to bring in the World Cup winning striker Julian Alvarez into the team. I know that would be shocking. But like, I think they'll just be all right. Well? My good, and the other point they made on commentary was he could do the quadruple this season with all 3 of those trophies and a World Cup winners medal all in the same season.
I think I saw something like in one season he would have like completed football, but I think he still needs to win. I think he still needs to win the Copa America and he still needs to win the Carabao Cup.
Crazy, but you can't. The perfect season.
But yeah, it's pretty much like it's pretty much as perfect a season as you can get if he wins the treble with City.
Yeah,
and you know what, he wasn't necessarily a bit part player. Like he's played in a decent amount of games, and he scored. Has he reached 10 goals as well in all competitions for? I'm not too sure,
but every time he's played, I think everyone, including myself, has been quite impressed.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll see what happens for the final. I guess we'll give our predictions closer to the date, because anything can happen in the 3 weeks leading up into it. But yeah. Where do you want to lead to next?
Oh, well, I think it's only fair because you sort of cruelly brought up my team in the last segment. we gotta talk about the fact that the Premier League title is done since we last talked off. Not quite done, but
it's
pretty
done.
Much.
I saw the calculations and permutations, and like it's pretty much if Arsenal lose, City win the title. If Arsenal draw, City win the title. If Arsenal win and City draw, City win the title. So it's like in every single instance, like it's City winning the title. So like even if Arsenal win their last 2 games and City just draw one of them, it's enough. A draw is enough for City essentially. I guess going into the weekend, there was, even after the Everton, like we expected City to win.
Well, I thought there was a chance they could drop points in that game.
There was a chance, but we still expected City to win. Like,
you know what was cheeky? The Eurovision sort of pushing that game one day back. Sort of, it didn't help them because obviously now their game was closer to the Real Madrid second leg. But it's kind of helped them in that game.
Wait, why did Eurovision? It was just because of
it was in Liverpool, and they wouldn't have. Yeah, I imagine they wouldn't have had enough police and security for both events at the same time. Well, that's what Pep was thinking, but ultimately, I think they've come out of it, and it might have helped them. So
it probably did, because it gave them an extra day's rest after that. The Madrid, after traveling to Madrid, that is.
But I'll put it this way: I thought that City could drop points more than I thought Arsenal could drop points in the fixtures that they have. Yeah. But that's Brighton for you. And
but look, to be quite honest, to finish my point though, going into the weekend, there was still hope, because it's like, well, City just need of their 4 remaining games, they need to lose 1, draw 1. And then even after the Everton result, it's like, okay, well, they still have Brighton themselves, and this is before we went against them. They still have Brighton themselves, and they have Chelsea. Yes, it's Chelsea that's in 14th or something, but it's still Chelsea. Like, it's the same argument that we had to when they were facing Real Madrid in the Champions League. It's like they still haven't good enough players. It's whether or not those players can actually perform on the day to get a draw at least. So there's still hope, I guess. That's something could happen.
Well, especially after Newcastle.
Especially after Newcastle, yeah. But then after this result, it's just like, yeah, the door is shut essentially.
3-0 at home. I must say, Brighton were pretty unbelievable in this game. They were crazy good.
Not necessarily in the first half. I felt in the first half, I'm like, okay, maybe Arteta was like in the first half as a supporter, I was like, okay, we're not necessarily like dominating the game on the ball, but we're playing with a really high and really intense press, and a couple of times we did force Brighton into mistakes, and we did look threatening at times. I think Brighton only had like 3 or 4 attempts at goal, and like none of them were on target in the first half, whereas we had 9 attempts and 1 was on target. So I'm like, okay, maybe Arteta's decided that this is the game plan for us to try and play like on a really quick break, try and win the ball back really high, sort of like the way Liverpool played last season and the seasons before this season. And I'm like, I'm pretty happy with this performance because the intensity's there, the intent is there. Maybe we just don't want to play with the ball. Like maybe we want to play quick and direct. So I'm like, all right, this is fine. And then, yeah, and then the second half happened, and that was collapse, capitulation, whatever C word you want to use. The one grievance I'll have is probably with VAR for that first goal, because I think Ferguson did step on Kivior's ankle or heel that made him go down and not allow him to defend. Was it Enciso? And
yeah, it's a tough one.
I'm not sure whether VAR looked at that or not. There was no word about it, but when they re-showed the replays of it, and they're like, and the commentator here was saying like, he was saying himself that I'm not sure if VAR looked at it, and maybe they should have looked at it, because if you're, I don't know what the exact ruling of it is, but it's like if you're committing an off the ball foul on a player to then give an advantage to your player, so I don't know. It probably should have been looked at. If it wasn't.
I think they did look at it, but I don't think we only got the angle that sort of showed the contact and what happened, like a couple of probably 5-10 minutes later.
Yeah, we got it way later. Yeah, so I don't know whether they did look at it.
Yeah, I think it probably should have been given a foul. But
here there was mention of I can't remember what player played the ball back in. Or like, was he offside or not? But like Saka kept him on because he, after trying to stop his run, he continued to run because he couldn't stop his momentum. So maybe it's one of those instances where, similar to Brentford, they're looking at one instance without looking at another instance of impeding the play or whatnot. Or
honestly, just
maybe it's that.
I just don't think they ever got that angle in time.
I don't know.
What I'll also say is Kivior should keep his feet. He's like, when you're defending the box, you can't.
How do you keep your feet when someone stands on your heel?
Because it hurts, but you get on with it. But you get on with it. You clear the ball and then you go down and you say, "Oh, my foot's been trod on."
But the thing is, if someone stands on your foot when you're trying to use that as your foot to take off on, you're gonna fall over.
I think he should. I still think he should have kept his feet. He made a bit much of it. He probably should have got the foul, but at the same time, you could take away that element of it by just standing up and defending, and then going it down after. I think it's just way too. You've got to program yourself as a defender never to go down, because there's going to be times where the referee's not going to bail you out. So you're just going to have to stand up and defend in those. I'm sure it hurt. It looked like it hurt. I think he got raked on like the ankle and stuff. But in those moments, you've got to do better. You've got to train yourself. It's harsh, but that's what football is. But anyway, it's not all Kivior's fault. I think for the most part, he's looked pretty good. He should have been in for holding in that time. Yeah. The sleeve has been away, but that's hindsight. That's 2020. But yeah, I didn't. I think there was no way that Brighton would go into the Emirates and completely dominating Arsenal. Arsenal is still the second best team in England this season, and for a large part of it, they were the best team in England.
The second
so
half
you're
was
not going
definitely
there.
domination. The first half, I wouldn't say it was domination.
Yeah, and that's why I say they were as good as they were, because even in the first half they weren't completely dominated themselves. They were still doing what they kind of wanted to do. Arsenal were doing it's sort of a match up in styles when you play Brighton, because they're trying to lure you into that press, obviously, as we all know now, but obviously teams can feel like they get a lot of joy out of that. See Newcastle this morning, who all but booked their place to the Champions League with that 4-1 win against Brighton. But yeah, I don't know. It's just disappointing that we don't get at least somewhat of a race. But especially after Newcastle, I think to your hope point, I think there was hope for Arsenal somewhat. Were they the second game on the Sunday? They were, weren't they?
Yeah, they were
So
straight
they got to watch
that was straight
Manchester
after,
City
yeah.
win. Yeah, so if that had something to do with it, maybe. Because I think
Maybe.
I think Everton sort of became the sexy sort of zag this weekend, where people were like, I think Everton could pick up something against Manchester
Especially
City.
after
I was one of them.
beating Brighton 5-1.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they just became too sexy a zag, and Man City went, "Nah, fuck that. We're gonna beat Everton as we should." And they did, and yeah, I wonder if that just
But you know what?
punctured Arsenal's tire a
But you
bit.
know what? I forgot to mention City still have Brentford as well, and Brentford at Brentford, albeit now it's going to be without Ivan Toney, who I think scored both goals against them in their win earlier in the season. But so the last 3 games were actually really tricky ties for City. So if Arsenal could have done their job and beaten Brighton at home, who it looks like they might be turning into a bogey team for Arsenal. I know we beat them earlier in the season at their ground, although that was with Graham Potter in charge, not De Zerbi, and they've looked better under De Zerbi. They have 3 really tricky ties, and I think that our last 2 ties are easy on paper. They're not tricky, I don't think. So it could have been. Something could have happened essentially, but now it's like, yeah, the door is shut, the key is in the lock. It's turned once, and it just needs one more turn, one more half turn to double lock it pretty much. I'll say that
11 nails are in the coffin, so there's just one more to be put in.
The last nail is that much into being complete. You can still jack it out or whatever. But yeah.
Oh man, I think my final point is I'm kind of glad you got to experience this season, this Manchester City. I know it's not exactly
City going on a 11 or 12 game unbeaten EPL.
Yeah. Now you know how I feel. I've experienced it twice. So just keep that in mind when...
Twice or 3 times? Because you had last year, and then you had... I think the 3 times.
Yeah, last year and in that 18-19 season.
Wasn't there another one?
2 times. No. We sort of fell off. Well, we won the title after 18-19. We won it comfortably. City didn't push us. And then we fell off the next season, obviously. And then the season after that was last season. So... And we were sort of building towards it in that 17-18 season when we got Virgil van Dijk and made the Champions League final and beat City at Anfield. But we were never competing. That was their Centurion season. So, but 2 times is enough for me. I'm sick of Manchester City. I didn't enjoy the first segment of this pod, I must admit, even though they deserve all the flowers that they're getting. But I'm glad you got to experience it. You now know what I went through.
See, the thing is with City, I think on the last one, the pod before that, it's hard not to hate them because they do play.
You mean it's hard to hate them?
It's too hard. It's hard to hate them because...
No, I agree with your first statement. I agree it's hard not to hate them.
Because look, for I think any neutral, if you're a supporter of any team that isn't competing, I guess for the top 4. So if you're any of the other 16 teams, Actually, I guess there's 16, 17 now competing for top four. So if you're any other of the 14, 15 teams that don't compete for the top four, top six, you're a neutral. Essentially, you enjoy watching City play, and that was me as an Arsenal fan. I guess like in the past four seasons, 5 seasons, like I always enjoyed watching them play. But now that we're at least after this season, we're a direct competitor, and hopefully, if we make the right signings in the summer, we're going to continue to be a direct competitor. Yeah, I'm going to be sitting in yours and Klopp's boots, and I'm gonna start hating more on City, I suppose. But at the same time, it's hard to hate on City because it's not like they play just counter-attacking football or like.
I'll offer you a segment. They have, or a segue. They have, like I said, they've got the dark arts. Not the dark arts, but they've got the grimy way of winning games.
Now, yeah.
But they're not Roma, is what I'll say. And that will give us our segue into the Europa League.
Yeah,
So
like
they're at least like still nice to watch.
I saw the results and
Another one for him. Oh my god! I didn't bring myself to watch the whole game.
but
It's
you know
because it's Roma.
what
I'm sick of Roma, man.
but just
I love Mourinho, but I hate Roma.
but just touching on the other game as well, like Sevilla. Another
Time. Juve did reasonably well, but
But
you just
another
can't-
bloody
you can't
final.
beat them with a Sanchez. Yeah, you can't beat them with a Sanchez Pizjuan. So now it's what outweighs the other. Is it Mourinho in cup finals, or is it Sevilla in the Europa League?
who are pretty much Sevilla in the Europa League are like Real Madrid in the Champions League.
I don't know.
Um,
But Mourinho in cup finals, he does do very well in them. So
I don't think he's lost the cup final, has he? Because he got fired before the Tottenham one with the Carabao Cup.
yeah, that's crazy.
I'm not
to
sure
think.
he has. Has he lost the cup final?
Oh,
Oh,
gotta think
that's.
that.
Look, I'm gonna give the
Maybe
floor to
not.
you, and I'm gonna quickly see if I can find the answer to that. So take it away
yeah, I
on
guess-
whatever
I guess-
game you want to talk about.
Well, I don't think there's much to talk about in the Europa League. I thought it sort of went the way that we expected, even though that's hard to say given that the second leg of Sevilla Juve. I think we expected Sevilla to get through. We just didn't know how they would get through because they're not really a team who have everything under control. But you just fancy them under that atmosphere. We're always gonna get past, and in this competition, like we keep saying. I thought Juve were pretty good in the game. That was the game I had in the background, but it's not. They just didn't quite do enough to overcome Sevilla and the crowd. And Roma are Roma. They had a 1-0 lead. They defended it. I watched the mini match. Leverkusen had all the chances, but Roma did what Roma do. They took the air out of the game. You could see Alonso and the players getting frustrated throughout the game.
Yeah, that's
Look,
what
Roma-
Mourinho
look,
does.
Yeah, it's fine because they're allowed to do it and it's a viable tactic to use. But for me, it's cheating. And I don't necessarily blame Mourinho and the players. I blame officials for allowing it to happen and lawmakers. Like, why? There's such simple solutions. Why do we let this crap happen in games? So I don't know. I could kind of see an argument why we wouldn't bring in laws to stop this because it somewhat evens out the playing field. It gives teams like Roma who, look, if I want to make moral arguments, I would say they're cheating in a footballing sense, but who can't throw up the argument that Manchester City and Premier League clubs and PSG are cheating in the financial sense and being able to resort to dark arts and playing football like this sort of evens the playing field somewhat for teams like Roma.
Similar to Atletico and against
Yeah.
Real Madrid and Barca, like you can't compete with those two clubs.
Atletico have tried their best in recent seasons.
Exactly,
They've spent a lot
but
of
they've
money.
had to resort more to those dark arts than what Real Madrid and Barca would allow. Like, and their fans definitely don't allow it, whereas Atletico fans, they enjoy it.
Yeah, it's not entertaining for me, but I get that it kind
Yeah.
of balances the morals and everything out. But I just think there's easy solutions in terms of if a player requires treatment, just send them off for 10 minutes. They need to be checked out. And then, all right, what do you want to do? Do you want to bring on a sub or do you want to play for 10 minutes without a player? And you'll never see a player who is not actually injured stay down anymore if that is the case. So I just think it's so easy to help the entertainment aspect of the game. But alas, this is how they get here. They have some good players. Roma or Roma, they'll do what they need to do. And Mourinho is Mourinho, and he's box office himself. So that'll be some fun. But unfortunately, we have to watch Roma play in a final. But it'll be interesting to see what the outcome is, given the Sevilla legacy and the Mourinho legacy clashing.
Mourinho has lost 3 cup finals. One of them was the UEFA Super Cup with Chelsea, but that was Chelsea after they won the Europa League with Benitez. So he took over. So I'm going to forgive him on that one because he took over, I guess, like in pre-season, and that's one of the very first competitions that you play in. So that wasn't necessarily him. And I think that was that team that
Two seasons later, he won the league with them.
Yeah.
That season, they made a Champions League semi. They got beaten by Atletico, I think.
Yeah, and that was should I mention it?
Wait.
That was that season was the Stevie G slip-up.
Oh, yeah, of course it was. 13-14.
So there's that one, and then there's a FA Cup runner-up and UEFA Super Cup runner-up with Man United. And once again, that Super Cup was after... No, he won the Europa League with them. Yeah. So there's... But, yeah, so there's...
What was the FA Cup? With Man United. Who did you lose to?
17-18 runner-up, says.
I don't know who won it.
City, I guess.
Maybe your boys.
No, our boys versus Chelsea in the final.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that is an incredible record. There's no major European finals that he's lost, so that record's still on the line. I know there's 2 Super Cups, but
it was Chelsea that won it. That FA Cup.
Yeah. There you go. This is all club as well.
Yeah. But anyway, do you have anything to say on Sevilla Juve or?
No, not really. I can't really grasp what Sevilla are except for specialists in this competition this season. They've had 3 separate managers.
But that's amazing. Like that they it's not like it's one manager. Like for instance, like Zidane winning 3 on the trot with Real Madrid. It's not like one manager. I think Emery won 2 or 3 with Sevilla, was it?
I think he won 3.
Yeah, but then like they keep on making the final with different managers, different players in the team as well. Like they probably have a couple that still stay there, but I think generally it's pretty much almost a completely new squad, right? Because it's amazing.
It's a real anomaly. For sure.
Well, it might just be that mentality thing that I alluded to regarding the Champions League. Like you have these players at like AC Milan, Real Madrid, Liverpool that they're walking around the club rooms and they see like 6, 7, 14 trophies in the cabinet, and they're like, okay, like this is the ultimate goal. I guess for Sevilla, winning the Europa League is the ultimate goal.
Crazy, and they've given themselves, I would say, pretty much a 50% chance, like Roma, of making the Champions League next season. And they both need this to make the Champions League because Sevilla have never looked like making it, and Roma, I think their results recently in the league mean that they probably won't finish top 4. So this is how they need to do it.
Who do you give the edge
I'm interested to see that.
Has Dybala been playing? Is he injured? And should this give him time to
him
be
and
back?
Wijnaldum were on the bench against Leverkusen, so
I'm assuming they're not fully fit then.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. So I have no idea who's going to win this final. I think it's...
I'm going for the narrative.
That clash. Yeah, well, which narrative though? Is Mourinho continuing to not lose? Yeah,
and then I might chuck a $5 on him to win the Champions League next year. with
Yeah,
Roma.
fair enough. You'll get good returns on
Oh
that
yeah,
if that happens.
yeah.
I guess just looking ahead to the weekend, there's a couple of games that should tickle our fancy. I don't think there was much to say from last weekend. Just that Arsenal bottled the league. No, I'm not gonna.
You
Come
know
on,
what?
come on. I
Hang on,
joked.
hang on. I have to everyone saying that like we bottled it. You know what? Man United bottled it in City's first Premier League win because they had an 8-point lead as well. Okay, and they gave up that 8-point lead. So if we're going to say that our 8-point lead is a bottling, so is Man United's. But when was it? 13 years ago, 12 years ago. So that's my counter to that
No, that's
argument.
fair. No, that's fair. That's fair. I'm not telling you any differently. In fact, that's probably more of a bottling job than this, to be fair, because I think this Manchester City are better than that Manchester City. That Manchester City was really good as well, but this one's
But
different.
this one's
level.
definitely way
So,
better. Yeah, and then obviously we can bring in other instances and other teams as well. One more closer to your heart. But anyway,
No, we're not. We're not doing that.
let's continue.
Oh man. I think this weekend there's only 2 games really to look out for, and the first one is Bayern against Leipzig.
That should be a good
I
game.
think this is, yeah, I think this is pretty much the title decider. At least Leipzig are coming in good form. Although that might take their edge off a little bit because they look all but secured for Champions League top 4 now. But yeah, well they'll still need a win next week, but they'll have
Yeah.
a much better chance than doing it this week against Bayern. But Bayern have been playing very attacking and they won 6-0 against Schalke. Now we must say it's Schalke, so how much can we take out of it? Schalke look like they probably will get relegated.
Again,
Yeah, and so Bayern were allowed to do what they wanted, but Tuchel looks like in the last 2 weeks that he settled on a sort of 4-3-3, very attacking 4-3-3. The fullbacks come into midfield there. They can even push on from there as well. And then a lot of attackers, Musiala is one of the central midfielders. So they've been going a bit more gung-ho, as you can see by 6-0 on the weekend. But I think this is the ultimate test. Do they play that way against Leipzig, who are a team who are perfectly capable of hurting them going the other way? It's not Schalke, that's for sure. So this seems to be the last test. Who are Dortmund playing? They're away from home this week, are they?
Augsburg.
Away, right?
Yes, away.
Yeah, so that throws in a level of intrigue because at home they've been unbelievable on this run. On this title run. They were, 4-0 up in like 20 minutes on the weekend against Wolfsburg, who were completely on the beach. But you'd still probably expect them to beat Augsburg, although, like I say, the fact that they're away throws in some intrigue, but there's no doubt that if Bayern are going to not win the Bundesliga this season, then it's going to be, for me, it has to be at the hands of Leipzig. It has to happen this weekend. They have to drop points. And then the door will be open for Dortmund. So that's what makes this game ultra fascinating. I don't know if you have anything to say on that or...
Not really. I think the Bayern Leipzig game will be more telling to who wins the league.
Of course. This is the almost the cup final for Bayern in terms of winning the one trophy that they're expected to win every season, and this being their only chance of winning a trophy this season, so very important for them. And another very important game this weekend is Milan against Juve, because now Milan only have one avenue into, I believe it's this weekend, I'm pretty sure.
Have a look.
But Milan only have one avenue into the Champions League now, and it is through the league. They've been given the gift of a stumbling.
No, it's not this weekend.
Lazio.
They got Sampdoria this weekend. It's Napoli Inter this weekend.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, that's a good enough game itself. Inter might have been given the gift of Napoli already being on the beach. I'm looking ahead of myself. I was more excited for Milan v Juve, given that Milan have such big stakes on their games now because they have no other way into the Champions League. And yeah, like I say, at least they've got the gift of a stumbling Lazio who need to. I think it's 3 points between Milan and Lazio.
Hang on.
Oh no, it's 4
It's 4.
because
Yeah,
Milan.
it's 4. It's 4.
Yeah. I think that one might nearly be done. To be quite honest, now Lazio still need a win, but I think they have favourable fixtures on the way in. So I don't know. Lecce at home should have been a favourable fixture, though, and they couldn't win that.
Yeah, it's 4 points. Yeah, so even if Lazio win and Milan win this weekend, because I think, what did I say, Milan have Sampdoria, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's still with 2 games left, so 6 points to play for 4 games. Yeah, so it's still not going to be wrapped
And like
up.
I say, Milan do have Juve the weekend after.
But if Milan lose and Lazio win, then
It's over.
If they draw, I think it's over as well. Yeah, I think it's over if they draw as well, because goal difference is better.
If Milan draw.
Yes.
Yeah,
because then that will be a 6-point gap.
Yeah. Yeah, and the it's not goal difference, it's head-to-head.
Oh, is
but
it?
Lazio won the head-to-head because they won 4-0 at home against Milan.
There you go, but goal difference is 12 goals as well. Like, so even there, there's a big enough gap.
There could be some very good players on the... Well, Rafael Leao signed a contract extension, which is crazy for me. So, I don't know. Let's see if the others fall in line after that. Maybe Milan just keep all their players. Maybe the Italian clubs keep all their players this summer.
Maybe.
This could be a watch this space.
Apparently, what was it? I think the commentator was saying before the Inter versus AC game, I think from ticket sales, they generated 12 million euros alone for the second leg, whereas the first leg was 10 million. So, and I think that's that's apparently a record for the Champions League as well. So like that alone, I'm not sure how that's distributed. I'm not sure whether it's a 50-50 distribution between home and away for these games, for like when it comes to Champions League, or how it's divided up. But even so, like AC Milan made 10 million alone from ticket sales, and I think they were also saying from the Champions League, like TV rights and whatnot, like that they're gonna make like 50 or 60 mil just for making the semis. So
yeah, well, they better enjoy it this season because there's a good chance they're not getting that money next season.
Yeah, so, but they have some was it a Chinese owner or a Thai owner or something, like a billionaire. So when it comes to money, I don't think they're in a bad spot.
No, the Milan clubs are not doing too well. Inter will have a big job. I think they need to reduce their wages over the off season.
That I can see, but AC, because they don't have Berlusconi. He's not the CEO anymore.
No, he's not.
Owner. It's some Chinese guy or whatever.
Last I don't know exactly who it is now, but last I heard it was Redbird Capital, who were like an investment group who came in, fixed it up, and I think they've sold it since. But
yeah, let's have a look. AC
I
Milan
think
owner. It's still Redbird, who owns 99.93%.
There you go. But all right, I want to finish. I'll finish on this point because there's one. It's just food for thought, and it's on the same topic about Italian clubs potentially keeping all their players. I was shocked to learn that a very prized player from Napoli could be available. Because who do you think?
Well, apparently it's all signed, sealed, and delivered with one of your favorite defenders.
Wait, what's happening? What's happening? Tell me the news. Have I missed this?
Apparently, Kim Min-jae is going to United. Man United, that is.
That's all done.
Apparently
Oh,
it's done.
He was who I was going to
Apparently it's
bring
done.
up because he has a 60. He's the only one who has a release clause, and I think he has a 60 million release clause.
Apparently it's done. Let me just double check that because I saw it a couple of days ago. Kim Min-jae.
That's a weird one, actually. Because if there's one part of United you'd say is quite strong, it's the defense. Although
It's not
you could
all
also-
done. Apparently they're
Okay.
in advanced talks to sign him, and they are big favourites.
don't go to United. Don't do it. Stay at Napoli. That's my number one choice. I don't know though. It's crazy that he has a 60 million release clause. I think that just speaks to how unexpected it is that he is now one of the best centre backs in the world. We'll see if that continues next season, but the way he defends, I don't see why that wouldn't continue. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe see that's a tricky one for United because if Varane's fit and Lissandro's fit, then I would still put Kim in over them, but that's a hard job dropping one of those
Yeah.
guys.
And you'd probably,
So, I don't-
in all honesty, Lissandro is Ten Hag's boy from
Oh,
Ajax.
you know who I would love Kim Min Jae for? Like apart from Liverpool, obviously. Newcastle. Put him next to
Ooh.
Sven Botman. Double down on that beastly defense. They'll concede like 10 goals next season.
Yeah,
That's
I think I've already claimed that they're going to challenge for the title next season.
well, they're as good as in the Champions League after they beat Brighton 4-1 this morning. They are. That was an interesting game in itself, actually. That was sort of the clash of styles that I was talking about that Arsenal will maybe try to exploit with Newcastle. Their press just winning out. They're such a good team. I know Brighton is everyone's hipster's choice, and rightly so. They're a great team to watch. I probably prefer. Well, no, I actually do prefer watching Newcastle, and I certainly admire the way they play more because I don't know. I always find the grit and the grind and the hard work and the defending well, especially in this day of football, an age of football. I find that more admirable than the pretty nice football. Like it's great to watch, but I don't find it as admirable as playing the way that Newcastle have played this season. And ultimately, I know Zerbe wasn't there for the whole season for Brighton, so maybe this is a bit unfair. But ultimately, that's why Newcastle are going to finish in the top four, and Brighton, while they've had a fantastic season, just not quite going to be there.
Wait, but just rolling back a little bit, was Kim Min-jae the one transfer guy or news
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was always going to bring up because he was the only.
to United as well, or to
Achievable.
someone else?
No, not to United,
Just
but
in
I
general.
knew about his release clause,
Uh-huh.
the 60 mil. Yeah.
Apparently it's 50 million euros, not 60.
Exactly. Well, even better. I would be surprised if no one snapped him up, if possible. I hope he stays at Napoli, but I don't know how many other players Napoli are going to lose. I think if anyone wants Victor Osimhen, they're going to have to pay ridiculous money, absolutely crazy money.
Have you heard? Apparently, Arsenal might be going in for João Cancelo.
Wow, that'd be
Sign another. Like Zinchenko leaves City so that he can get out of his shadow, and then you go and sign him, and then he's your first choice left back over Zinchenko anyway.
oh my god.
Actually, but you know what? Like, I don't think Arteta was there when Cancelo came in, so they haven't worked together. And if he has discipline issues, when we know how much of a strict ship that Arteta runs, I'm not sure if that's necessarily a match made in heaven or a good signing.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think João Cancelo has been pretty good in recent weeks for Bayern, and I was going to say he's back in Tuchel's good books, but I don't know if that's the case because Alphonso Davies got injured and he's out for the rest of the season, so it might be more necessity why João Cancelo is playing. But in fairness, and especially the way Bayern are playing at the moment, he has been flourishing in the advanced role that he's playing. So,
But also,
look, all in all, he's still a wonderful footballer.
oh
It's
yeah,
just,
100%.
those
But
questions,
also
yeah.
now that Arsenal have presented themselves as a direct rival, whereas at the end of last season, City didn't even have that in their thoughts. Would they be willing to sell to Arsenal once again after seeing what they did once they signed Jesus and Zinchenko? So it's. I don't think it's a signing that Arsenal should necessarily go for. I think they should stick to getting. I think Bellingham to Real Madrid is done, isn't it? Or pretty much like Kim and Jay advanced talks. So Arsenal should just stick to trying to get Declan Rice, since it looks like he is the number one target.
Yeah, we'll have time to talk about all of this. Well, I think even in coming pods, given the state of the season, I think we're at that point where it's pretty much Bundesliga title and Champions League, really.
And there's
top 4 in Italy.
How would you?
I don't even know.
You know how I said that Arsenal winning the league is pretty much the final nail is already in the coffin. It has like a centimeter left before you nail it down. So probably even less than a centimeter, like half a centimeter, enough to just pry it open. What are Liverpool's chances of making top 4?
We'll see after United go to Bournemouth this weekend.
But United still have Chelsea as well.
Yeah, but they need to drop points against Bournemouth. If they don't drop points against Bournemouth, I think they have a really easy game in the last game of the season.
Who's their last game of the season?
So the fact that they're playing away, the fact that their home record is so good, this is the last chance to lose, and then even if they do that, Chelsea still need to be good enough to pick up
Fulham
something
at
off
home.
them. Yeah, exactly. So Fulham can offer their own problems, to be fair to Fulham, but I don't know, especially because they're at Old Trafford. They've been really good at Old Trafford this season.
Well, you're looking at, is it 2 draws is enough?
Yeah, I think if they draw twice, then Liverpool will overtake them.
Yeah, because you have a plus 18 goal difference.
Yeah.
And even if we go to head-to-head, you guys beat them 7-0. So, yeah.
I give us a less than 5% chance.
So, with the coffin analogy, would you say that unlike Arsenal, the final nail hasn't been put in yet, but 11 of the 12 have been put in?
It's like they've used the big thick pencil and they've put an X where it's got to be, and they've got it in their hand, but it's not quite touching the wood yet.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that analogy. Is there anything else to add before we wrap things up?
I think we're good, and then we'll stumble our way until the end of the season of things to talk about. But yeah, the main takeaway is Manchester City will finish this season as, for me, the best team in Europe.
Yeah. Do you,
I don't know if that can be argued.
/ the world as well.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it up with this. How much do you think Gary Neville is hating on the fact that City is on the brink of a treble, and it looks like, and they're favourites in every single one, whereas like back in '99, I don't think they were favourites. Pretty much, I think they won. Did they win the league with 1 or 2 games remaining? They won it by 1 point, and then the FA Cup as well. Like Arsenal were favourites for the FA Cup and the league.
That was the epic semi-final, wasn't it, with the Ryan Giggs goal?
Yeah. So like they weren't like favourites for any of those 3, whereas at least like City are favourites for, and they've already wrapped up the league, but they're favourites for the FA Cup and the Champions League. So
I think Gary's all right because he can point to Arsenal bottling it. After he's like, oh, Zinchenko's calling a huddle, they've completely lost their minds and stuff. It's just like, all right, Gary, come on. He'll point to that and he'll say, look at the way they capitulated down the stretch. And
I have a feeling that in terms of his hate for clubs, it's Liverpool, Arsenal, then City. Because back when he was playing, City were never a direct competitor.
I think Arsenal are high. Well, he might hate Liverpool more, but I think he has a layer of respect for Liverpool that he doesn't quite have for Arsenal. I don't think he has that same respect, especially for Arsenal in recent times. Maybe of the days of Vieira and stuff, he had that level of respect, but recent Arsenal, I don't think. See, the last 5 seasons under Klopp, he's had to have that layer of respect for Liverpool again. But for Arsenal, he hasn't quite got there. Maybe, well, from his predictions. The prediction about United finishing above Arsenal after we'd seen the first 10 or so games of the season is just madness for me. That's crazy.
But even after last season as well, like after seeing like this, and this was before I think United signed Casemiro. Like even then, like predicting it, and then like you said, even after like 10, 15 games, still predicting that as well.
He'll give us a few of them, old mate G-Dev. You just got to take the good with the bad with him.
Yeah, I think his analysis of football itself is very good, but when it comes to predictions, I think
he can let the heart become involved.
Yeah, he definitely predicts with his heart rather than his head. But it's he's there for entertainment purposes.
You finish it above United, so you get the last laugh as an Arsenal supporter.
Oh, but we bottled it. Well, I'll just point to he was commentating back in that I think it was 11-12 when City first won it. Or was it 10?
That sounds right.
11,
because
12.
He did the Champions League, the famous Champions League semi-final with Barca and Chelsea, didn't he? The goalgasm.
Yeah. Well, his United team bottled an 8-point lead, so I'll just point to that. Well, that's the counter argument.
What a place to finish.
Yeah. on Gary's goalgasm, I'm sure he finished too. And on that note, guys, apologies for the audio for the first half hour. And yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And thanks for coming, and bye for now.